what I noticed was I was always the one instigating the conversation about how are we going to film this kiss? Do you want to use tongue? Do you not want to use tongue? Where are you going to put your hands? Where should I put my hands? And it was always really uncomfortable. Having an orgasm on screen, I don't just have a generic orgasm on screen. We came up with so many different questions around what type of orgasm it was, why I was orgasming, which is exactly what you do when you're filming, you know, say an emotional scene. You know, you wonder, why is my character crying? I lost all of these babies, but that wasn't supposed to come to fruition with that man. I could look at it and say so many awful things that happened to me before I turned 40. But now when I look back on it, I think, they absolutely made me who I am today. It can be very hard having a partner that's an actor when they're going to set every day and making out for work with their co-stars. I'm so in love.
Sarah Roberts, welcome to the Stellar Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. You've been in Stellar many times, but This is the first time on the podcast and the first time that you and I have sat down for a proper conversation.
And I feel like it's been really, I'm going to put my first dad joke in here, serendipitous. Serendipitous.
I love it. Let's keep the dad jokes coming. I love it. It really was meant to be, because we ran into each other at an event in Sydney just a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It was at the State Theatre, and you mentioned that you have been working on a documentary that will be showing there as part of the Sydney Film Festival in June. And the documentary is called Make It Look Real. Mm-hmm. And it features an intimacy coordinator, Claire Warden, who draws from her experience in Hollywood in terms of creating a safe environment for actors when they're filming love scenes or sex scenes. Mm-hmm. So, Sarah, an intimacy coordinator, it is a word that entered the industry and became something that a lot of people heard about in the wake of the Me Too movement back in 2017. Some people might still be a bit unclear on what it is. Could we just start by talking a little bit about what it is, and had you ever worked with an intimacy coordinator in your career?
Great questions, and you've really done your research, haven't you? Because there are so many people that don't know what an intimacy coordinator is. And strangely, I had worked a bit before I'd done this documentary, but I'd never worked with an intimacy coordinator. And now, having worked with Claire, I think they're so important and they make you feel so safe on set. And I think as an actor, that enables you then to be able to play and explore. So basically what Claire does is she comes onto a set and she liaises with the director and the actors, and she has conversations with the actors about their boundaries, what they feel comfortable and safe doing and not doing, and then also liaises with the director to see if we can film everything according to these guidelines. She creates boundaries, I guess, so that everyone feels safe on set. And so then moving forward, there's no abuse or sexual harassment in the workplace. That's the aim.
As I say, it had been born out of the Me Too movement because clearly there were discussions, and women in particular, not exclusively women, but primarily women talking about feeling unsafe. Mm-hmm. And there were times where those really intimate scenes, they felt that they were being put in a position where they were uncomfortable, feeling exploited, possibly in danger. Their boundaries were really being crossed. But where do you go? Because everyone's like, well, we're play acting. That's what we're doing. What were the different stories that you had heard of, experiences, good and bad, on set?
I hadn't heard of any of these stories, but as a new actor on new sets, I was always quite nervous to film intimate scenes. And at that stage in my career, they weren't really, crazy sexual scenes. They were more, let's say, kissing scenes with an actor that I hadn't worked with before. But what I noticed was I was always the one instigating the conversation about how are we going to film this kiss? do you want to use tongue? Do you not want to use tongue? Where are you going to put your hands? Where should I put my hands? And it was always really uncomfortable because I felt like that should potentially be the director's job. And what I found a lot of the time was that directors would feel there are so many that I've worked with that are really comfortable at doing that and make you feel really safe. But then there were others that were too embarrassed or shy to, use the correct vocabulary on sets and actually take the reins and choreograph, I guess, what should be choreographed when you're filming intimate scenes like that. So it was so much responsibility on me coming up through the ranks as a female actress to choreograph these scenes myself. And it was really uncomfortable, actually, because then you'd get, most of my scenes besides working with Zoe Ventura have been with men. So then some of them would be like, oh, well, let's just go for it, or do whatever you want. And then you're kind of nervous about the scene itself and then nervous about the intimacy that you have to play on screen as well, and wondering, am I doing too much, too little? Where are his hands going to go? Should I be putting my tongue in here? And having an intimacy coordinator just makes it all so much cleaner, and it takes the stress away, and you have someone advocating for you. And it's almost like another director on set that can just work really specifically on those scenes.
I think that's so interesting and such a great description of what it must be like. There's a few different things from that I'd love to unpack with you. One of them, when you were talking there, Sarah, about, as you say, the onus being put on you, particularly as a female actor in a scene, as in just go with it and see what happens naturally. As an actor, if you were playing a scene where you were preparing a meal, even if it's quite a simple meal, it might just be, putting some pasta, I would imagine that somebody there would be giving you a little bit of guidance in terms of, well, actually, this is a good way. Probably if you look, this is a good way of cutting onions or something, and we don't want you to hurt yourself, or just be careful with that boiling water, or you'd be given some direction. They wouldn't just say, go into the kitchen and whip up a gourmet meal. So it is a lot of pressure intellectually and emotionally for you to be having to navigate that.
It's exactly right. And I think like a good example is a stunt scene, for example. If you're filming a stunt scene, the director doesn't just send you on and say, go for it, and you just flail about and punch the other actor in the face and then kick him in the nuts or whatever. It's choreographed. If you have time, you have like weeks to work on that. If you're working on something that has less money and less time, then at least you get a block through, or you have a stunt coordinator. So I don't understand why it took the Me Too movement to bring in intimacy coordinators.
It's such a good parallel that you've made there, because if something does go wrong in a stunt and somebody, we know things can go terribly wrong, but things can go terribly wrong clearly in intimate scenes as well.
Yeah, and I think, maybe it's there are probably a couple of reasons, but maybe it's because a lot of the time people are ashamed or scared to talk about sex or intimacy. That's also something that I found myself doing the documentary. I was scared to even play pleasure, desire, sex on screen. And that was something that I found really, I had to really have a think about that and wonder why I was scared to do that. But yeah, it's so interesting because like even, dancers, they have choreographers. You can't just go for it when you do the tango. With a musical, you don't just say, okay, get up there and sing. It's all rehearsed. So it should be the same with intimate scenes.
And do you think, Sarah, is part of the reason why it has taken so long for it to be given the gravitas and the professional respect that it deserves as part of the toolkit that is demanded of some actors is, apart from the gender aspect, which I obviously would love to talk a bit more to you about, is it because there's this perception that, oh, that must just be fun, especially from a male lens? We've heard lots of people anecdotally say, oh, my gosh, like that lucky so-and-so, they got to kiss Sarah Roberts, or, gee, I wouldn't have minded, that guy, how lucky were they being in that scene with Angelina Jolie? So it's something that everyone thinks, oh, half their luck a little bit.
That's exactly right. And I think also a lot of people think that, well, everyone has sex. So it can't be that hard to play it on screen. Like, you do it in your private life. So just put it on screen. Just act now.
That's right.
And
That's why I made the cooking analogy, for
Right.
instance, because there's something they go, well, you know how to go and do pasta.
yeah. But like, another role that an intimacy coordinator has is what I really found with Claire was she helped me find the specifics and the nuances within intimate scenes. So, for example, having an orgasm on screen, I don't just have a generic orgasm on screen. We came up with so many different questions around what type of orgasm it was, why I was orgasming, which is exactly what you do when you're filming, you know, say an emotional scene. You know, you wonder, why is my character crying? You know, there are so many different questions, and I think it's not just as black and white as just having sex on screen. And there are also questions to ask too when you get given intimate scenes to play. Is it justified for my character? And they were also a few points that we touched on in the documentary.
Yeah, and I can imagine that would be something that would come up a lot when, especially, again, young female actors are reading scripts in advance.
Yeah.
Like, is this actually necessary?
Yeah.
And how does it progress the storytelling and my character's narrative arc, if at all?
That's exactly right. Like, does there have to be nudity, or is it just being gratuitous?
To have that think about it. And as you say, there is clearly part of the reason that it has struggled to be taken seriously is because everyone goes, it was very natural and we don't need to overthink it. I wanted to ask a little bit, when you talked about kissing scenes, for instance, Home and Away is one of the roles that you are very well known for. You starred on that for quite a few years from 2017. Those sorts of soap operas like Home and Away that run in prime time, so they're not obviously have that really sexually provocative or graphic content of, say, some of the streaming services or a film, for instance. But what are your memories of the first time you had to perform any sort of intimate scene, even if it was because a kiss, you've got the whole crew out there on set at Palm Beach or in the Channel 7 studios for Home and Away. It's not nearly as romantic and easy as it looks.
There is nothing romantic about it at all. And I think that, you know, I don't mean to... I hope this isn't avoiding the question that you're asking me, but I would like to circle back to The Last Tango in Paris with Maria Schneider. And, you know, she had to do this scene in that film where she wasn't told beforehand what was happening. And Marlon Brando had a block of butter, and they used, you know, butter in a really awful way. And she ended up being abused in front of the crew, and no one knew what to do. And she was put in such an awkward position because she, you know, as actors, you're so used to saying yes to everything. You don't know when your next job is going to come. But what an awful position for everyone in that room, the crew watching on and probably wanting to say something, but not knowing what to say or how to react. But yes, so I go back to that because there's absolutely nothing glamorous about filming intimate sex kissing scenes in front of a massive crew like that. I guess I remember actually the first kissing scene I had on Home and Away was with my ex-husband now, and that was the kiss that I just talked about at the start of this podcast, where no one had walked us through what we were doing. I said to him, how much tongue do you want to use? Do we even use tongue? Like, I didn't know. And yeah, that was just a go for it. So it's hard. And I think also at the end of the day, like, another point I'd like to make is intimacy coordinators make those scenes very professional. So you can go to work and have a scene like that and know that it's work. And I mean, yes, that for us back then bled into our personal lives. But moving forward now for me, I know that a great exercise that I did, actually, I'm going all over the shop, sorry, but
that's what we do here. It's something to talk about.
A great technique that I learnt from a really wonderful coach, Kim Farrant, when I was working on this documentary, we worked on a lot of sexuality on screen, was my co-star in Make It Look Real, Albert Mwangi. He and I would say to each other before we started the scene, in service of my character, do you mind, or how do you feel about me putting all of my sexual energy onto you as Scout? Scout was the name of my character. And then after the scene's finished and we call cut, I'm going to take it all back. And I think that makes everyone feel safe, especially partners of actors too, because it can be very hard having a partner that's an actor when they're going to set every day and making out for work with their co-stars.
Well, I was going to ask you about that aspect of it, because talk about strange days at work. I think actually the opening scenes of Make It Look Real, like no pun intended, cut to that very, very instantly. It opens with yourself and your on-screen partner acting out a sex scene, and then the director calls cut.
Yes.
And you just instantly go on with your lives. And so that's clearly, I assume, a way for the audience to get a glimpse to the gear change that is required of actors in that sort of environment.
And what it should be like on sets.
When there is a scene like that, I wanted to ask you about watching that, because that's something I often think about too. You know, you will see actors at a premiere, you know, with their children sometimes, or, you know, their mum or their dad, and you think, oh gosh, I wonder if that was a bit confronting during some of those scenes.
Yes. I do have a partner now, and he hasn't seen the documentary yet, but he will be there with me on opening night at Sydney Film Festival, and we have spoken about it, and I've checked in to see how he feels about watching it, and he said, yeah, I don't know, I feel a bit weird about it, but he's in the industry, he's not an actor, but he knows that it's all, you know, make believe. I think also, I mean, when you said that, I felt like I wanted to vomit in my mouth, because I don't want to watch it again either. But what I'm trying to get comfortable with is, and I worked on this with Kim Farrant, is being comfortable seeing, look, I don't necessarily have to keep watching it, but being comfortable in my own sexuality. Because I think for many years that was blocked, you know, for various reasons. And I don't think, you know, particularly as women, we should be denied of that. I think we should be allowed to feel that in its full power, and that's really powerful. And I don't want to be ashamed of my sexuality, and I also want to encourage other people to be able to watch it and talk about it. Not just my sexuality, embrace their own sexuality, and
absolutely,
and be comfortable talking about sex.
That's why I thought it was such a fascinating subject for a documentary, and really wanted to talk to you about it, because it is a really interesting conversation in terms of what it says about us culturally, what it says about the entertainment industry, but also what people can draw upon it from their own life. And I was also going to ask you about that. As you said, it brings up a lot of issues, and working with someone like Claire, the intimacy coordinator, were there things that you had learnt about yourself that you would take away from you, and anything that you think someone watching the documentary might be able to learn for themselves as well?
I absolutely think that making this documentary changed my life. Wow. It came to me at a time when I really needed it. I learnt from filming this documentary that I had absolutely no boundaries. I had no boundaries at all. I was just a yes girl, you know, which is great sometimes. But I think now that I'm 40, I look back on my life so far, and it would have been great to have some boundaries and some respect for myself as well. I would sometimes bend over backwards so far that I would break my back, and I got very sick for a moment in time. And now I feel very confident walking onto sets. I feel more confident in my day-to-day life as well. In relationships, I know what I'll stand for and what I won't stand for. And I think I feel comfortable having hard conversations, you know, doing hard things. Whereas in the past, I would have just probably said yes to things all the time because I was scared I wasn't going to get another job or that I'd be a diva. But I've really, I feel like I grew into myself filming this documentary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I obviously want to talk more in our conversation about where this part of your life has coincided with this work. But was there anything in particular, do you think, that sparked that? As you say, turned 40 late last year. Sometimes those milestone birthdays can really, not always, of course, no pressure for anyone with a milestone birthday. Sometimes you wake up and everything's sort of the same. But do you think that also played a little bit into finding yourself or learning to have those boundaries? It's really wonderful to hear, by the way.
Thank you so much. I'm actually really proud of myself, and I can hear my friends like applauding me because I have a great circle of not just female friends, male friends as well now, who have really helped me get out of a rut. I was heartbroken for many reasons for a long time, and I have a great network of friends that really helped me get out of the mist. But I definitely think turning 40, I loved it. It was amazing for me. It was almost like a rebirth, and I think I had so many, I could look at it and say so many awful things that happened to me before I turned 40, but now when I look back on it, I think, oh, they absolutely made me who I am today and now. And I finally feel like a woman who's had all these lessons, and I've done so much growth. And a lot of people have said, oh, you might, experience a midlife crisis. It's been absolutely the opposite for me. I feel like I've lost my brother, my nana, had a couple of miscarriages, done a whole year of IVF, got married, got divorced. But I don't think I would love my brother to still be here. And I deeply, deeply miss Scout, my stepdaughter. But I wouldn't change any of that because I learnt so much from it all. So much.
I'm so happy to hear that. Like I said, I'm really glad to hear where you are at this point in your life. And
thanks, Sarah.
I think that question about if we had the non-existent time machine and we could go back, would we have those do-overs? If you ever find yourself in a position in life where you think, no, because they've made me who I am, that is surely the best that any of us could wish for one another.
Yeah. I've learnt, I think the biggest lesson I've learnt is about letting go. So I think, and actually my sister-in-law taught me this, because I think for such a long time I was gripping onto everything so hard and so tight, and there was so many things that I didn't want to lose, and it just felt like one after the other they were just like slapping me in the face. I just felt like I was losing everything. And then there's an analogy that I've heard about a balloon. Have you heard this analogy before? When you're young and you go to the carnival with your parents, and you get given a balloon, and it's this bright, shiny, beautiful balloon, and you think it's the best thing in the world, and you want to keep it forever. You don't want to let it go. You don't want anyone else to have it because it's your balloon and it's so beautiful, and you love it so much that you tie it onto your wrist and you never want to let it go. But then over time, it loses its air and it starts to wilt, and it's not as beautiful as it was before. But then you're kind of left with this balloon, like this dead weight just hanging off your wrist, and you're carrying it around. But then have you ever noticed what happens when you let go of a balloon and it goes up into the air and it just floats off, and it just looks so beautiful, and you think, well, there's a part of you that's sad, and you're like, well, I'm not going to get that balloon anymore, but someone else is going to have it. And maybe I'll go off and I'll find a bigger, better, more sparkly balloon, and it'll have all these other different qualities that I'll love in different ways. And that was, I've been in a lot of therapy. I've done all the therapies, but I think that was the biggest key to feeling how I'm feeling now, was just letting things go. And just believing that they exist in other ways, and that like trusting in the timing of my life.
Sarah, from a physical appearance, it's obviously something that is dissected so much for women in the spotlight. What you look like, how you dress. There's, my goodness, every 1 second there's probably 4 billion words being written critiquing a woman's body. For you being on set, just from a physical perspective, that if you're not wearing an awful lot of clothes, I mean, a lot of women think, oh my gosh, I don't even like to go to the beach in a bikini. How is that something that you have become more comfortable with in as your career has developed?
That's a really cool question. I think it leads back to what I was saying before, potentially about turning 40 and just feeling more comfortable in my skin and finding more self-love and self-respect. And also the way that I like to work is I really like to find the nuances and the specifics of my character. So, for example, with my character's name was Scout in Make It Look Real, and we had made up a backstory that she was potentially her and I've forgotten what Albert's name was in the documentary. But anyway, I spoke to him. We were chatting about our backstories, and we came up with that we were potentially trying to have children, maybe doing IVF, and I've got experience in that, and so I really wanted to make that true for the character. And I know with IVF that I definitely didn't feel or look my best. And so I just kind of embraced that. And I think this might be a long-winded answer to your question, but what I really try to embrace is the truth of things, particularly when I'm playing characters, but also in my day-to-day life. I really value honesty and truth. And so I think maybe that's how I embrace my changing body and how I look on screen. I try not to look at myself as Sarah, but I try to look at myself as the character. And I know, for example, there have been times where I've had a lot of acne, and that used to really upset me. I did a film called Felony, and I had a lot of acne on my chin. But then I thought, my son was dying in the film. Of course, I'd be stressed. I'd be, on the cusp of grief. Of course, I would have pimples on my face, And I think we're representing humans on screen. I want to be human. I don't want to care about how I look anymore. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I think that's what I value the most.
And I'm sure it is easier said than done because, as I say, there's such a double standard and so much pressure. It's very easy for audiences to say we just want to see ourselves reflected back. Much more difficult if you're the person being dissected under such intense scrutiny. But when we talk about representation, I think what you've said there cuts to the heart of so much of it, isn't it? We just want to see ourselves reflected back, looking amazing, looking not so great, looking a little bit worse for wear, going through this period of our life, going through that phase of our life. That's really what people just want to see, literally warts and all.
Yes, I think so. And I think also you could link that back to, intimate scenes, because there are so many different ways that people express themselves in intimate scenes. And I don't know for you, but there are times, when I'm being intimate with my partner where I feel insecure. And in Make It Look Real, I asked all of those questions of the director and asked myself for, in service of my character, because I wanted to be able to portray potentially being insecure while I was having sex with my on-screen husband, if that's how my character was going to be feeling, because that's a real experience for a lot of people. So I don't think, intimate scenes, they're not always like hot and heavy and sexy, and, sometimes the most vulnerable parts of you come out.
Absolutely. And the conventional depiction of love scenes and sex scenes on screen has been very glamorous
Yes.
and very idealized. So
Yes.
anytime for people that are then encountering real human experiences,
Yes.
could be a bit like, what's going on
Gosh,
here?
yeah. Why doesn't my hair look like that? Why do I have cellulite? Yeah.
Exactly. But then when we're driving home at the end of the day, it's not like we think I'm not driving through the street like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. What's going on here? So we know there that's all, there is a stunt coordinator, and it's
Yes.
good to know, I think, and demystify that process for
Yes.
people, I think, when it comes to intimacy. Sarah, let's zoom out a little bit over the course of your career. Working on this documentary, you also work as a DJ, so a lot of
Yes.
traveling there. And then you've also, of course, been seen in everything from Wog Boys Forever, Scrublands. Having come off Home and Away, where you worked from 2017 to 2021, that's a very all-consuming day job, if you like, isn't it? They're very long days on set. How are you finding that change of pace, going and having the freedom to take on a project like Make It Look Real, to pack up, go overseas, work as a DJ? Do you miss those days where you knew exactly where you were for 50 hours a week, or do you just love the freedom and that, I suppose, being an actor for hire brings with it?
Sarah, I absolutely love it right now. But I didn't always feel that way. When I finished up on Home and Away, I didn't want to leave. I would have stayed on that show forever. But it's weird because I was thinking about this in the car the other day. And this kind of, goes back to what I was saying before about trusting the timing of my life and having learnt all these lessons. And now in retrospect, I can see that it was all meant to be. I'm challenged every single day, and I'm so proud of the work that I've done. I could have stayed at Home and Away and played Willow for the rest of my life, but I wouldn't have had all these amazing experiences and been challenged and learnt about setting boundaries and been able to tap into my comedic acting. I love doing comedy. I love going to set every day and laughing, and I get to work with all these amazing actors and directors. And then, like you said, I love music, and the luxury of my job, I guess, means that I'm able to travel around. So I've seen a lot of beautiful countries and met a lot of amazing people, and I actually can't believe how far I've come, because I didn't think that all of this would be possible, let's say, two years ago.
Well, it has been a very big few years for you. And as you've already touched upon, a lot of the things that have transpired in the last few years have been, incredibly challenging, to say the least. Can I ask you a little bit about some of those moments and how far you have come, if you don't mind? Obviously, your brother Carl, who passed away in 2019, he walked you down the aisle at your wedding only a few months before he passed away. So you once said to Stella how he was more than your brother. He was my best friend and like a dad to me. Can I ask you a little bit, if you're comfortable sharing, how does his presence show up in your life today as we're sitting here in 2025?
It's so amazing, because I feel, in a way, I don't think closer is the right word. I don't feel closer to him, but I can absolutely feel him around. And I'm sick of saying, oh, this might sound woo-woo, because I actually genuinely believe it now. I ask him for signs and he shows me signs. There's a project that I wasn't sure if I should say yes to coming up, and it involves a lot of exercise and a lot of training, and I decided to go on a run. And I always used to train with my brother, and I asked him, oh, Carl, can you just show me a sign? Should I do the show? And I looked up in the sky, and there was not one, there were two rainbows. There were two rainbows in the sky. And then I tried to take a photo of both of the rainbows. And he would always, he loved rainbows, and he'd always speak in rainbows. And And I couldn't take a photo of both of these rainbows. I couldn't get them both in the shot unless I ran up the sand dunes. And so it was almost like he was training me again.
To run up the sand dunes.
Yeah. And here's a funny little bit you get for free. My partner at the moment, I think I probably had a lot. Ending my marriage was really hard because that was the last time I really spent with my brother. He walked me down the aisle. So I've almost felt like, in a way, I was betraying him if I ended my marriage, which I absolutely know now that he would have wanted me to just be happy. So moving on after that was hard for me, but my partner now, whenever we're going places like catching a plane overseas, I'll look down and there'll be a rainbow on his dick, on his pants. And my brother had a great sense of humor like that. My whole family does. But I feel like it's my brother telling me that he's the one for me at the moment.
Oh my gosh. And what does your new partner think? When did you tell him? When did you say, so I want to talk to you about my brother Carl and rainbows and what I'm seeing here?
Yeah. Well, me and all his friends call him Rainbow Dick now. So he's pretty chuffed with the nickname.
I love it. It's bad enough, obviously, to go through grief and losing someone so precious to you and have that huge void in your life, and then to go through another challenging period like the end of a marriage is even harder than when you are navigating what would have already been challenging without that person. So as I say, it's been a hell of a few years.
Oh yeah, it really has been. And I'm not lying when I say that I am proud of myself because, also dealing with, I imagine dealing with a divorce is hard enough. Dealing with it all in the spotlight and then everything that came out in the media after that absolutely ripped my heart in a million little pieces. And there were times when I was in the fetal position on the floor and I needed friends to literally come and peel me up off the floor. But I can't change anyone else's actions or the way people behave, but what I can take responsibility for is the way that I feel. And I know that hurt people, but healed people can heal people. And I'm so happy with where I'm at today. And I love two people now. I've finally, and I can hear my friends applauding me, I've finally found a love for myself, which I didn't have. I know now in retrospect I didn't have for so long, and that I've done a lot of work on that, and I'm still finding myself. But I have beaten myself up for a long time because I stayed in something that wasn't healthy. But now I have found this love for myself and also fallen in love with a man. I'm so in love. And I remember someone saying, you shouldn't think of yourself as a half and then look for another half to make yourself complete. You should know that you're a whole, and if you're lucky enough, you'll find another whole, and then together you'll be the sum of your greatest parts. And I just feel so grateful that I found Rainbow Dick because he's allowed me to grow in such beautiful and unexpected ways. And I just think he's been able to provide, it's because he's been able to provide such nutritious and safe soil for me to just blossom. But if I didn't have that, I would still be okay because I finally found myself, as cliche as that may sound. And it did take all of that. Oh my God, all of that to get there. And weirdly, I wouldn't give it up because I have so much compassion and empathy now for people who are, experiencing similar heartache or and I don't think I would be with my partner now if I hadn't gone through all of that.
And I would hope that for each of us that we do eventually accept ourselves and find ourselves whatever age that happens. At 40 is probably relatively young. There will be a lot of people still grappling with that level of self-acceptance and knowing that they are enough and that's the real love. But for you, as you say, it might not have happened if you hadn't had all of that difficulty and heartache that you've been through.
Yeah. And I've just learnt so much. Like, yes, I lost all of these babies, but that wasn't supposed to come to fruition with that man. I gained a beautiful stepdaughter who I will love till the day I die, no matter what happens. I miss her terribly, but that's probably actually the biggest thing that I take away from that marriage is that you can love someone so deeply when they're not even blood related or biologically yours. And that connection, no one can ever take that away from us. No one can ever take away those memories, that time that, I raised her full time for 7 years and homeschooled her during COVID. And yeah, they're some of my fondest memories. And I wouldn't have got that if I didn't go through all the hard times as well.
As we bring our conversation to a close, how is life looking today? Just even practically, are you spending a lot of time in Australia? I'm not sure what Rainbow Dick does for a living or lives, but is this a relationship that would also change things there in terms of where you would be based?
I won't say too much more about Rainbow Dick because he really values his privacy. But yes, we both like to travel. And that's something that I've loved doing, over the past couple of years. I've done Japan, Belgium, Ireland, Italy. I've lived like a rock star and I'm very grateful for that. I have a couple of projects coming up that unfortunately I'm not allowed to talk about, but that's also very exciting because it means they're exciting projects. And I guess I have this new lease on life, like I said, and I have a team player by my side now, and I think the world's kind of our oyster.
Absolutely. And it's so lovely to see you so happy. And I thank you so much for being so generous with all of your story and your vulnerability and your experience today. And so much of it has resonated from what we were talking about with the issues that are being explored in Make It Look Real through to even, as you say, the things that might hold women back when they know probably something has run its course in a relationship and the reason and the pressure that we'll put on ourselves to stay there. Everything you've spoken about has really struck a chord with me, and I'm so happy to see you so happy and doing so well professionally and personally. And thank you so much for your time today, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It really was serendipitous that we came in today.
It was indeed. It was Sarah Roberts, Indipidus. There you go. And you can see Sarah Roberts in the documentary Make It Look Real at the 2025 Sydney Film Festival, which runs from 4th to the 15th of June. And we'll have some info on that in the show notes. I will see you soon,
Thank
Sarah.
you so much, Sarah.
Thanks again.